Are you seeing?
Yes, we are.
Do you want me to talk as well, or is this good now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So, what is AI? And I'm sure many people in the audience, if asked, would have an impression of artificial intelligence as just robots. You want me to continue? You want me to just do the
Yeah.
presentation?
Yeah, just hold on a sec, Ronaldino, for me, please.
Okay.
Yes, Ronaldino, that's exactly what we want. And then when you come to the end, you'll say over to you, Atiba, and Atiba will pick back up.
Well, we do that a couple times in the presentation, though.
Yeah, you do it a couple times in the presentation.
Every time. Yeah.
Okay, Ronaldino, what we're going to do for your presentation, for this presentation, you and Atiba, right? You are going to control the slides. So you can hear when Atiba is speaking, right? So what we're going to do is let you do the controlling of the slides for this particular presentation. So when Atiba starts, you would have the appropriate slide, and then when he says over to you, you just control the slides from your end.
Okay.
Okay, so go forward to the slide where you hand over to Atiba, for example. So go down to that slide. That is it there?
Yeah, this is it. Yes.
Okay, so just say like two sentences and then say over to you, Atiba.
Okay. So, having looked at what AI is, let's look at some of the future goals and purposes of artificial intelligence and its utility in our education system.
The goal of AI. That
Thank you
works.
very much.
Okay.
So Atiba and Ronaldinho, both of you, Atiba, you'll be there. Ronaldinho, you're going to be controlling the slides from your end, okay? So when you hear Jahim introduce your section on artificial intelligence, then you will bring up the beginning of the presentation. Got it?
Okay, so I will be leading this even as Atiba is talking, because there's a little bit of a delay, but I guess that's not much of a problem.
Okay. If there's a little delay, that's fine. That's no problem. Yeah, so we are good, Ronaldinho. We will let you know when to you would hear the presentation, so you would know when you can present. Okay?
Okay.
Lisa, good afternoon, Lisa. We're going to ask you to, Lisa, turn on your screen and share your presentation, please.
Right, no problem.
And you're going to share your presentation? Right. Okay. So, Lisa, for your presentation, from the time you begin, you're going to hear when Jahim introduces you. You are going to control your presentation. So, you're going to do it from your end. Okay?
Okay, no problem.
That's fine? And when you're finished, you will close the presentation. That's fine.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Lisa.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon's session is called Caribbean Education Youth Voices, a student-led discussion on issues affecting the youth. And we are going to have, the moderator is a member of the youth, Jaheim Thomas. So I will invite you to come now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Erdin. President of the Caribbean Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools, Mr. Stephen Jackman, Executive of CAPS, delegates, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good afternoon. Oftentimes, we see our schools through administrative lens, which can be clouded by bureaucracy and the voice of teachers and policymakers. Today, we are pleased to incorporate the voice of a major stakeholder in the education system, the voice of those to whom we cater, develop policy, and run our schools. That voice is the student perspective. In keeping with inclusivity of the CAPS Regional Conference, today's student-led session involves 3 Caribbean territories from 4 different schools. The students would have met online. Yes, they are integrating technology to benefit. Ooh, what's going on? Awesome. Over the past weeks and discussed and researched some pertinent issues affecting them and their peers. Today's session is not only intended to share, but to suggest solutions for those challenges which we all are facing. In light of increasing demands from the curriculum, the constraints of limited instruction time, the students will be presenting on education and the moral imperative, evaluating whether there is the need for the moral imperative and those challenges that may negate the inclusion and compromise the effectiveness of such moral imperative. To this end, I would like to welcome the team or the panel. Lisa Yee from Holy Faith Convent, from Cova, Trinidad and Tobago. She's joining us online. We have Ronaldino McLean from Campion College in Jamaica. He's also joining us from online. I am your moderator, Jaheim Thomas, and I am a student from the Law School Barbados. We have Sinovia Storm Husbands from Harson's College, Barbados. We have Giovanni Gittins from Harson College, Barbados. Kewell Griffith from Harson College, Barbados. Sydney Ford and Atiba Seeley Thompson from Harson College, Barbados. After the presentations, there will be a question and answer segment where persons are encouraged to pose their questions for further clarity or challenge the perspective posited. With that being said, I would like to introduce Lisa Yee, who is online, as I would have mentioned, to just discuss with us briefly the role of education. Lisa Yee.
Right. Hello. Good morning. Right. My name is Lisa Yee, and I will be presenting on the rules of education. Right. Some rules of education are acquiring knowledge and skills, empowerment and social mobility, social cohesion and citizenship, personal and public health, research and innovation, personal development. Now, education is defined as the transfer of skills and knowledge. However, I consider education to be very beneficial, but some policies and ideas need to be reshaped as they seem to be outdated. Example, training teachers more efficiently to handle and to adapt to changes like the pandemic or to be up to date with new teaching methods, as all methods would not necessarily work for everyone, and having more teaching methods aid in fulfilling the numerous rules of education. Quantity rather than quality. Caribbean schools lack the manpower. Mentioned in a World Bank study done in 2013, most of our islands here do not have national policies on early childhood development. There is no leadership, no investment, no financing being placed there. There must be it must become a national issue that was proposed by a delegate. Less than 15% of school leavers move on to further education in the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, or the OECS. It is a chronic issue to gain qualified teachers as there is a prevalence in unqualified teachers. Pass rates for core subjects like mathematics, English, science, particularly, do not yield good results. Promoting diverse teaching methods in Caribbean schools can significantly enhance educational efficiency. According to a UNESCO report from 2022, incorporating interactive technologies like virtual simulations and multimedia resources facilitates active student engagement and fosters critical thinking. Additionally, integrating project-based learning encourages collaboration, creativity, and problem-solving skills among students. Is there room for pastoral care in education? Of course there is. There's always room for improvement. So pastoral care can be integrated via student support services, emotional and mental health support, creating supportive environments, character education and values, social and emotional learning, receiving pastoral care from educators. As a passionate Caribbean student, I wholeheartedly advocate for the prioritization of pastoral care in our schools. It is not just a matter of convenience, it is an essential aspect of nurturing our overall well-being. Cranmore.org research demonstrates that a robust pastoral care system can profoundly impact our mental health and academic performance positively. By implementing culturally relevant counseling approaches and fostering peer support networks, we can create safe and inclusive spaces that empower us to tackle challenges and build resilience. This investment in our emotional growth will not only make us responsible and successful individuals, but will also foster a more compassionate and united Caribbean community. So let's come together to embrace pastoral care, shape our future, and create a brighter and more equitable tomorrow. Education is the key to unlocking the world, A Passport to Freedom by Oprah. Now, the big concept is, does education shape society or does society shape education? Currently, society shapes education more than education shapes society. Education is influenced by society's beliefs, values, norms, and needs. It responds to societal needs and demands, is tasked with socializing individuals, transmitting knowledge, and society influences education through reformation and policy decisions. It can influence attitudes, values, and behaviors. While they both shape each other in a sense, I believe education should shape society more. Caribbean education should be the driving force in our society rather than society dictating how we learn. A strong educational system has the potential to instill values, promote inclusivity, and empower us to create positive changes. By emphasizing culturally relevant curricula and fostering critical thinking, Caribbean schools can prepare us to be active contributors in building a better, more unprejudiced society. Education shapes society, the future. Now, in briefing, we want to incorporate various teaching methods, focus on improving pastoral care, have education shape society instead, and focus on the quality of education. That will be it.
Thank you. Hey. Thank you, Lisa Yee. The role of education, it is very important. But I want to pose to us the role of youth in education as well, especially youth participation. This pose an interesting question. How does education shape society, or does society shape education? But today I also want to pose to you, if such is the case, how then does the moral imperative shape us through the transformation of education? At this time, I would now like to invite Giovanni Gittins to speak to us briefly on the moral imperative in education. Giovanni Gittins.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I would just like first to take some time to thank the team in charge of all of this. I mean, this is truly fantastic. I've never been here like this. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about the moral imperative in school. Specifically, should we teach morals and how would we do so? So first thing I have to do now would just be to establish some definitions. So the linguistic definition of morality, or rather of morals, is referring to behaving in ways considered by most people to be correct and honest. Morality would refer to the conformity or degree of conformity in which to the conventional standards of moral conduct. That being said, the philosophical idea that this whole conversation will be based off of is Immanuel Kant's moral philosophy, saying that it is a principle or rule that guides one's actions based on the sense of duty, obligation, or responsibility, where a moral imperative can be expressed as a categorical statement such as you shall not kill or you ought to help others. Now, in that definition, you would have heard a little bit about the categorical statement. So what exactly is the categorical imperative and the hypothetical imperative? Well, the categorical imperative would be a moral belief or value that is kept constant throughout all cultures, classes, races, and societies. So the example I would have given would be thou shalt not kill. Does anybody disagree? Okay, good, great. So we are avoiding trouble here. But then you have the hypothetical imperative. That is a moral belief or value that is determined by one's personal desires with regard to the outcome of said belief. So a hypothetical imperative would be the whole idea of you have to put yourself first. We see that in American cultures a lot, especially since they have a very competitive business world where everybody's trying to reach the top. However, in a collectivist society, for example, Japan, that wouldn't really be considered a moral value. That wouldn't be considered correct or honest. But what is the societal importance of morality, or why am I even speaking about this today? Well, the According to a 2014 paper entitled Moral Character Predominates in Personnel Perception and Evaluation, Professor Jeffrey P. Goodwin and colleagues note that morality is one of the most important factors that influence whether people like you or dislike you. And even going beyond whether people like or dislike you, morality is one of the concepts or one of the most important characteristics of a person that determine whether people think that they are a good or a bad person. I mean, after all, we wouldn't expect that the Pope is going to be the head of a Mexican cartel, will we? Cognitive scientist Dan Sperber proves this in his 2012 study, Moral Reputation, an Evolutionary and Cognitive Perspective, where again he is proving, just highlighting that as you look at societies, you're realizing that simply someone's morals, regardless of how they look, regardless of socio-economic status, it all determines whether you think that ultimately they are a good or an evil person, and if they're capable of doing good or evil things. The reason, that would be important, despite a lot of children my age believing otherwise, is because it does matter what people think of you. I mean, imagine that you have a farmer student who's going into the workforce and they're trying to get a managerial position against a lovable, good-willed, and kind-hearted colleague, whereas they are seen by their boss as unlikable and respectable and an overall bad person. How close to 0% of a chance you think they have of beating that person? I mean, I would say that that's, what's the word? Infinitesimal? Another concept we have to look at right now is the dynamic nature of moral education. So do we shape education, or does education shape us? That would have been alluded to by my colleague Lisa in the beginning. So when it comes to shaping education, policymakers, influenced by the will and desires of their people, are given the authority to transform the educational system. However, when you look at then the morality being shaped by education, we understand that the same people who influence the policymakers to decide where we're going to take education or moral education in the future are their very concept of morality was shaped by what they were taught in moral education. So that's a really important concept to note for the future. So let's get into this. Should schools teach morals? First, we have to look at the purpose of the school. Is it arming the workforce, or is it preparing society or preparing people for life? Well, by definition, the school is made to prepare people for the workforce. So that's why we have this, that's why the whole organization was created. That's the ideal scenario. But the reality is, my bad. So the ideal situation would be that each social organization, for example, school, would execute their role perfectly. So then you would have the family unit, like the nuclear family. You would have the church, mosque. You would have, of course, the school. And each of them will have different roles that they would fulfill in order to better society, or to achieve the goals that society wants to achieve. And the idealist would also say that an attempt to fulfill the role of another institution would actually be an attack on their rights. I mean, think about how many parents would send a letter to the school saying, we do not want our children to do prayers in assembly. But realistically, 86.64% of the children's lives are spent in school. That leaves just 13.36% of a child's life available to be impacted by the family unit, by the church, by the mosque, by the religion as a whole. So do you really think that that's enough time for parents to instill good moral values into the children? I really don't believe so. As a matter of fact, I believe that the institution in which people spend the most time should accommodate the teachings of other institutions that are negatively impacted by that lack of time. We have to remember that at the end of the day, the whole goal of this, the whole reason that we have these institutions and organizations is so that we can develop society and develop a well-adjusted individual in society. So whose morals should be taught? Well, firstly, let's just establish that the government is going to be the one ultimately in charge of deciding what goes into the curriculum. They are a legitimate power, so they have the authority and the right to do so. But are they for the people? Are they by the people? Are they both? Ideally, the government will fulfill the needs of all members of the society to the best of their ability. But realistically, that's too hard to accommodate. I mean, in Barbados alone, we have upwards of 300,000 people. I can't imagine that we would go and talk to each of them individually, see what they say, and then implement it. Realistically, the government will then have to fulfill the desires of those people with power. And that makes intuitive sense. You control the people at the top, you're able to then influence the people at the bottom. But regardless of whether you subscribe to the realist or idealist ideology, we would understand that the best way to assure that the largest number of members of society is appeased in terms of moral education is by holding a referendum. So let's look at this referendum. What morals would be decided on? Well, from the beginning, we looked at the categorical statements and the hypothetical statements. So we can agree that with the categorical statements, we don't really have to do much deliberation on that. So a government can then decide on what core values, which would be the categorical statements, they're going to teach within their schools. We then must decide on what hypothetical statements or hypothetical imperatives would be taught. So you have for example, a hypothetical statement or that we would have to decide on in terms of morality. Will we promote alcohol? Will we promote promiscuity? Will we promote prayer? Or more realistically, will we promote the push for a school uniform, for example, as a marker of respect towards that school? Was that going to be a moral value that we uphold? Then you also have the case of the individual. After we decide all of this, after we decide what moral values the government's going to put in school, what moral values we'll push, we have to now look at the individual. So a teacher's influence, for example. The caring teacher is a concept where it is a teacher that engages students in informal discussion, they engage students on their personal lives, and they give advice to students as individuals. Of course, they would have their own biases, and as a member of society, they will still feel the need to share their ideas, their beliefs. So then I have a question for you. I'm going to leave it on this question. Should a teacher be barred from expressing their beliefs to students if they do not align with those of the government that they work for? Well, have fun with that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanni. The role of the moral imperative in education, I think is really important in terms of, I think, Giovanni, you would have mentioned just now about the whole cycle, right? So tell it again, the whole cycle, where it was, because this is something that we found very fascinating in our studies, where it was that the moral imperative, is it on? Awesome. That the moral imperative, go ahead, Giovanni. Is the mic on?
Right, okay. So the question regarding the cycle, right?
Right.
Okay, great. So what we found fascinating, and in case y'all are wondering, Jahim was actually my partner in this discussion, but the morals that we teach in education is based off of the morals that the society wants taught, generally speaking. Of course, the government is responsible for instilling these values, but they do acknowledge, the beliefs of their society. However, the beliefs of the society in the past that the government would have then acknowledged in making their plan for the moral education is what then determines what the current society thinks is moral. So you end up with this loop. And what's interesting about the loop is that if you change any part of that, whether you change the moral education
or you change what the people believe, it affects the entire system. So that's one of the most interesting concepts that I came across in
So it's
our
almost like
discussions.
what our Prime Minister would have mentioned yesterday when she said that the whole transformation of education is that it's not only the Ministry of Education's role, but it's a whole issue of national development and everybody involved.
Correct. That is exactly why we have to make sure that each, or rather, this is why I said that each social institution and each organization has to acknowledge this overarching theme of where do we want the future to be. So it's not necessarily do I want as a school to teach this one thing. It is really, do I want as a society that these things get taught? Who's going to teach them? I mean, if 80, what's the number? 86.53, I believe, % of the time we're at school. If the school does, or if the government does want to make sure that the certain morals get taught, it would be necessary that we teach them in the school.
Thank you, Giovanni. Before we go on to our next presenter, I would just excuse myself for a minute.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Two quick public announcements. One, we are aware that the AC has gone out. I have spoken with the person on the front desk, and they are sending someone to check it, so please bear with us. That's one. And two, it's raining very heavily outside, so I would caution us that as you go outside, if you're going to the bathroom, be very careful on the tiles outside. All right? Thank you very much.
Mental health has become a very pressing issue, one that is very hot within our society right now. And it is one that is very important to the development of the youth, especially our social development. To present on the role of mental health in education, I would now like to invite Kewell Griffith and Synovia Storm husbands as they make their presentation, as I would have just said just now, on the role of mental health in education.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Now that we see the necessity of moral values in schools, we must ask ourselves, why is this so difficult to achieve? What is hindering the strong moral foundation needed in our community? The answer to that question is the ubiquitous influence of mental health issues in the Caribbean. These issues eventuate due to social media usage, perpetual antisocial behaviors, and the lack of appropriate counseling in our region. Can the contrast between what we would like to see in our schools and the current circumstance affect our youth? Social media has a strong worldwide impact and can expose our youth to opposing moral ideologies. The effects of social media on the mental health and social development of today's young people are profound and multifaceted. On the positive side, social media has facilitated connectivity, allowing us to forge new friendships and explore diverse perspectives. It also serves as a platform for self-expression and creativity, where youth can showcase their talents and passions. Social media also provides a sense of belonging through supportive communities that share similar experiences and struggles. However, the negative impact of social media cannot be ignored. We can all agree that social media is a little too mature for our young people. Take examples like Twitter and Reddit, where 18+ content and gruesome images can be easily accessed. On top of this, social media perpetuates unrealistic beauty standards and fosters a need for validation, leading to feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem. As our Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, said at this conference yesterday, somebody else tell you, you must look X way, and you must do your hair Y way, and you must walk Z way. This pressure to present an idealized version of oneself can have detrimental effects on the mental well-being on our young people. Furthermore, cyberbullying and online harassment have become prevalent and further exacerbating the mental health challenges faced by today's youth. However, social media's negative impact is not so easily detected. Many times, the positive aspects of social media conceal the greater negative that ought not to be ignored. Social media creates a haven of relatability, which assures our youth that they're not alone. This removes the sense of loneliness that the youth may feel and replaces it with a sense of comfort and solidarity in knowing that there are others who are going through what they are. This sense of comfort and solidarity leads to the lack of self-improvement. Now that there's knowledge that there are others like them, our youth become comfortable in their state of mental brokenness. With no motive to get better, their mental health then further diminishes until they reach rock bottom. It is at this low point where they're faced with the challenge of wanting to get out or wanting to continue to hurt. The majority want to get out. This further begs the question, does getting out mean working towards improving their mental health, or does it mean tragically, unfortunately, ending their lives? Unfortunately, for the young people who make up 60% of patients treated in hospitals for attempted suicide, the latter was their only viable option. Social media's influence extends to social development among youth. While it offers opportunities for connectivity, it has diminished face-to-face interactions and authentic human connections. As a result, young individuals may struggle with essential social cues and conflict resolution skills in real-world settings. Excessive screen time and reliance on electronics hinder the development and interpersonal skills necessary for building meaningful relationships offline. Moreover, the constant availability and distractions of social media can impede concentration and interfere with the cultivation of important skills. It is crucial to strike a balance between the benefits and drawbacks of social media, encouraging healthy online habits. Ongoing research and awareness are vital in addressing the issues associated with social media, ensuring the overall well-being and holistic development of the younger generation. The instabilities in social development as a result of social media are more profound than initially understood. So, could one argue that social media is to blame for the surge of antisocial behavior within our youth today? Recently within the Caribbean, there have been many instances of antisocial behaviors within our youth. What is the reason for these antisocial behaviors? To answer this question, we must first understand antisocial behavior, what it is, and where it comes from. Contrary to popular belief, antisocial behavior does not only encompass isolating oneself from society, but it also refers to the actions and behaviors that disregard or violate social norms. It can also involve behaviors that are disruptive, harmful, or just go against the expectations or values of society. Antisocial behavior can manifest itself in various forms, ranging from aggressive and violent behavior to a complete seclusion of oneself from society. With the recent spike of violence in Barbados among our youth, we can all but wonder why, or how this antisocial behavior has crept its way into our own society. According to a study done by Stonewater Recovery, many environmental factors can cause antisocial behavior to materialize within a child. Some of these factors include parents who suffer with substance abuse, parents who exhibit antisocial behavior, parents who suffer from depression or other mental illnesses, parents who provide an unstable home, and poverty. According to the study, in most cases, antisocial behavior within the youth begins to creep in through instabilities in parenting. However, instabilities in parenting cannot only be blamed for the antisocial behavior within our youth. Youth mental health advocate, clinical psychologist, Krista Solene, made the claim that many of the general issues associated with mental health exist because of the lack of psychological and emotional support that these parents have, just like their children. She says, quote, "The gap is not only parents not listening or adults not listening to the needs of young people, but also that they just don't know how to. Our parents are struggling, and we can put the guidance counselors in school like I want us to. We can put in the support systems, but we have to address the parents. And this is not about crying down parents, but empowering parents, end quote. This claim, backed by a 2020 study conducted at the University of the West Indies, reinforces that many of our young people today are not getting the imperative emotional support that they so silently cry out for. This lack of support results in a degradation of the mental health and further musters an arrangement of antisocial behaviors. But why should our schools be concerned with this? Antisocial behavior is already beginning to creep into our schools. Small outbursts are starting to occur, with students defacing school property and subtly destroying our school environment. Okay, sorry. Subsequently, acts of antisocial behavior will begin to creep into peer-to-peer relationships. Small disagreements become large brawls, and playful football fantasies transform from friendly fire to fiery, fistful fights. So if the parents are to blame, why, oh why, should the schools care? With parents being the backbone of this issue, in theory, they should be the ones who are responsible. However, the reality is, many of the parents of the youth who exhibit antisocial behavior are not able to address the issue as they have their own intrapersonal battles to fight. Some of these parents are facing financial instability, rent eviction, relationship problems, and even antisocial behavior themselves. Some of these parents are not able to address their ward's behavior. Therefore, they often neglect it. And with time, I believe that with time, it's just going to improve. But this is not the case. The behavior only worsens, further producing offspring that could be potentially harmful to our future society. A change has to be made. A change has to be made. These children need the help their parents cannot provide. We can call upon our society for assistance, and we can cry out to our churches. But ultimately, the responsibility falls upon the next authority figure in line, the school. The main role of the school in our society is to prepare young people for the life that lays ahead of them. As education officials, sitting back and doing nothing would rob the school of its main role. It would be irresponsible. So, what do we do? I would like to invite my classmate, my friend, Synovia Storm Husbands, to assist me in further delving into this topic. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, QL. To effectively create an alternative and beneficial support group for our youth, we must first understand who the youth really go to for assistance. In today's world, it becomes less of a matter of who should the youth go to for assistance, and more so, who do they actually go to? In many cases, the answer is simply no one. Living in an unstable home, coupled with untrustworthy guidance counselors, who are our youth supposed to go to? This is where the role of mentorship within schools comes into play. The main forms of mentorship available within our schools today are professional psychological mentorship through guidance counselors and peer mentorship through their fellow students. Peer mentorship is the most common form of mentorship within schools. Students often feel most comfortable sharing their struggles amongst each other, as each involved party can usually relate to one another. Some students are even attracted to the idea of being able to build stronger friendships through a shared or common struggle. While this form of mentorship is simple and most desirable, peer mentorship is not in any way reliable and oftentimes does more harm than good. Student mentors today are not in any way equipped with the necessary tools and training to be able to support their peers safely. After disagreements or breaks in friendship, trust becomes compromised and students lose their support system. To ensure this does not happen, another alternative should be installed, namely guidance counselors. Guidance counselors play a crucial role in supporting students' academic, social, and emotional well-being. Through counseling, guidance counselors can provide an attractive environment for students to attend, further decreasing negative stigma surrounding schools. In addition, guidance counselors are most often the only other viable option for students when they're struggling with their mental health. However, many guidance counselors do not have the resources to handle the mental health of thousands of students. To this end, some may neglect to separate their own personal opinions from their professional role when providing guidance and support to students. Values and beliefs, career choices, sexuality, conflict resolution, cultural sensitivity, and religious issues are all areas where objectivity is difficult to achieve. This can result in a breakdown of trust between the counselor and the student. To further highlight this fragmented trust within the dynamic, students on various online forums we found report that they often approach guidance counselors due to feeling less comfortable approaching their own parents. Even with this at heart, many guidance counselors then proceed to contact the parent without the student knowing, taking that matter into their own hands. Counselors don't understand the dynamic between each individual parent and student, and they don't know the parents better than the students do. So why is this happening? When talking about this topic, it's important that we keep on referencing why the schools. Why must they be the one to bear this burden? While we can all agree that parents and educators should be coming together for the sake of the child, there's no legislature or governing rules that dictate how parents must raise their kids. Conversations about mental health, giving guidance and assistance, these are all areas in which parents decide how they want to act and how they want to handle it. But we can mandate that schools as social institutions address these issues professionally, accurately, and safely. Schools facilitate good mental health, and more often than not, they see the most drastic effects of student struggles. As my colleague Giovanni said, kids spend about 86% of their student lives in this place. Undiagnosed or untreated mental health issues can detrimentally impact students' ability to learn, grow, and function in a classroom. This will consequently cause grades to drop and student-teacher relationships to become harsh and stressed, which can further affect their mental health. This cyclic phenomenon is present all across the region, all across our globe even, and the mountain of associated issues grows taller when you detail the changes in schooling and education and their correlation with cognitive changes in children. Take the transition from primary to secondary school, for example. A very prominent change in a child's life in education, and every country in this region has its own way of doing it, whether it be Barbados' 11+ or Jamaica's recently installed PEP program. Ignoring the issues that people have presented with the tests themselves, this shift has been proven time and time again to have negative impacts on students. Walters et al. Conducted a 2012 study that highlights that students report fear and uncertainty during this transitionary period, and students struggle with their mental, social, and emotional health. This, in addition to students' desire to make friends and rely less on parents, as detailed by Topping 2011, and the cognitive and physiological changes associated with puberty in children, detailed by Simmons and Blythe 1987, makes mental health struggles even more prominent in our society. In fact, the World Health Organization reports that 50% of all mental health issues start at just age 14. And these are only the ones that are reported because the people want to get help. These factors can make students erratic and capricious, and these sudden changes and fluctuations, along with the inequality and streaming in schools, can lead to bullying and feelings of inadequacy. Instances like these are the prime examples of why our youth are struggling, and all these roads lead back to one place: the schools. Instead of shifting the responsibility of who takes care of and who nurtures these children, we should look at the facts of the matter. If our kids are not getting the help that they require in their homes, then our responsibility as a nation and as a region is to provide that help and to provide it safely and responsibly, with the school being the forefront of our operation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinovia and Kiwel. Yes, thank you. Kiwel asked one interesting question, and that is, what do we do, especially as it relates to mental health? There was a quote that states that youth make mistakes. This was back then, ha ha ha. Youth make mistakes, adults struggle, and old people, respectfully, they regret. I guess we all are young in here, right? Today they're saying that today youth instead, so the cycle is now changed. Today youth has regret, or youth have a lot of regrets. And that is important because it is one of the main issues for the whole mental health within our society. Dr. Ravi Zacharias, when asked about the purpose of pain, he said that where pain is present, that faith will always be tested, hope will always be daunted, and that love will always stagger among some issues. And so yesterday, it made me reflect, because yesterday when the Prime Minister said that the Can I Do is about the head and heart, creating the capacity above all else to rise and face the day. Sometimes for a youth to rise and face the day, before they can even ask the Can I Do, they ask some other logical questions that are very important to their development. And that is the who, the what, the why and when. Who am I? What is my purpose? When can I achieve or when can I leave? And why am I here? That is very important. At this time, I would like to invite Synovia again and Sydney. Oh, I'll excuse myself again.
Public announcement again. Update. They said the chiller is back on, and it should take about another 15 minutes for the room to get back the way it was earlier today. All right?
At this point, I would like to invite to present on diversity and assessment, Sydney and Synovia.
Good afternoon. School, by its very nature, exists to develop a competent and efficient population. The purpose of education is not solely to accumulate facts and figures, but rather to equip our students with the tools they need to thrive in the world. Meaning, we should seek to foster knowledge that extends beyond the confines of use in the classroom.
Albert Einstein famously said that everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its entire life thinking that it's stupid. Education systems have been historically critiqued for their focus on typical subjects like mathematics and English. But Howard Gardner, a Harvard psychologist, conceptualized a study that outlines the different categories of intelligence. This is Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, that essentially states that traditional curricula in schools do not emphasize everything that ought to be learned in the world, focusing instead on linguistic and logical mathematical intelligences, forgetting to improve and assess other forms of intelligence, which Gardner names as visual spatial, musical rhythmic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalistic, and bodily kinesthetic intelligences. The individual value that we place on these varying forms of intelligence is the real issue at hand. Sure, you can say that our examining bodies facilitate learning of a varied range of subjects, but what outlook or bias do we have about those subjects themselves?
Gardner argues that the more diverse a classroom, the higher the likelihood of all intelligences being taught or focused on within schools. Knowledge and experience, even genetics and upbringing, all dictate the level of intelligence we have. We're not born smart, but we experience life by gaining knowledge. Is this diverse classroom present in our schools? We believe it isn't. Diversity in this case does not mean that we have a specific number of persons from different ethnicities, but rather we highlight the differences between these students that present themselves. Already we see a divide between students based on subjects, socioeconomic status, race, and a multitude of other factors. And this phenomenon of what is essentially segregation is further reinforced and perpetuated in schools that pride themselves on being prestigious.
We can identify that this diversity is not typically present in these types of schools. The ones that are characterized as being good and smart, but how exactly are we meant to measure this? This prestige that many schools attach to their name doesn't leave when the students graduate. The air of superiority carries into universities and into the workforce, with people hanging their school ties on their rearview mirrors or coming back to give speeches to the younger students. In my school specifically, it's more than commonplace to utter the phrase, once a Harrisonian, always a Harrisonian. People force their children to attend the school that they did, to carry on their legacy. But what does being a Harrisonian or a Campionite or a graduate from any other school actually mean? For those that don't have older siblings that attended or parents in the PTA, it doesn't hold as much value, if any at all. Instead, it can mean being disadvantaged in a classroom, forgotten by your friends, or excluded from school activities. The diversity of these students and the experiences that they have the ability to share get shut down or downplayed for the majority, leading them to isolate themselves and their school spirit to dwindle. So how do we get the diversity that we seek within a classroom? By making them a safe space that facilitates all students to share their concerns, their experiences, and their opinions.
It is therefore unfalsifiable that schools should provide a diverse set of information to highlight students' individuality and personality. But regardless of the better judgment teachers or administrators may have, this simply cannot happen with the framework given by the way we format standardized tests. We know it all too well. A teacher struggling to finish the CXC syllabus due to time restraints, having to forego teaching other topics which may have greater importance or benefit in the world. That is to say, they have no choice but to focus entirely on preparation for standardized tests. But teaching to test isn't inherently bad. If the test measures the student skills that they're expected to be learning, and the teachers prepare the students by teaching those skills, then it's good. However, as it stands, the CXC assessment format is undoubtedly flawed. Assessments are supposed to function as metrics for progress in a certain topic, and by accurately doing this, they would also function as a platform for a learning experience. The question that must be asked is, are we assessing the right way? No, we are not. For one, practical skills are vital. Yes, it's important to be able to recite information, but we think most would agree theory is only there to facilitate application. So by moving away from traditional memory-based exams, we can better gauge a student's true understanding and capacity to use what they've learned and apply it in relevant scenarios. The Caribbean Examination Council does have this in the form of internal and school-based assessments, yet it's put on the back burner, being 20% of the final grade in most cases. One could argue 20% is a generally good portion, but IAs and SBAs are not prioritized. Despite being almost entirely recycled questions, sometimes reused for 10 plus years, the multiple choice or paper one is valued higher than actual practical application of the knowledge, according to most of the syllabuses. From our experience, almost every student simply memorizes every question and excels on these papers regardless of whether they know the information. Where on the other hand, IAs such as labs require much deeper thought and understanding that results in students honestly connecting with the entire syllabus. Are shallow assessments like paper ones really better demonstrations of knowledge than carrying out the very actions the multiple choice details? I'd estimate the vast majority of students would agree it takes more to finish a good SBA than it does to finish the multiple choice. Therefore, are we testing memorization or understanding?
Furthermore, these assessments and examinations do not allow for in-depth knowledge to be learned. With our current testing, there's typically only one right answer. But with more task-based learning, especially in humanities subjects, students can arrive at answers that are not entirely wrong or entirely right. This fits much more accurately with the way things work in real life. Performance-based assessment can show us much more effectively what a student knows by understanding the complexity of actually doing something further with the knowledge they've gained. Implementing different learning techniques like project or portfolio-based learning or co-op programs like are offered in many universities ensure that students actually get knowledge and experience tailored to their preferred line of work. I think everyone in this room would be more comfortable knowing that their pilot actually flew planes during school. Moreover, the emphasis of exams being rote memorization and regurgitation of information inadvertently creates an environment that promotes and even encourages cheating among students. The intense pressure to achieve high scores often leaves some to resort to dishonest means, undermining the integrity of the assessment process. We can concede that this is very hard for CXC to combat. Efforts have clearly been made, but we believe that this common issue is only accentuated by the current format we have. A shift towards practical assessment methods can effectively mitigate this problem. When students are assessed on their problem-solving skills and critical thinking, they're more likely to engage authentically with the learning process. Emphasizing these practical assessments fosters a culture of academic integrity. Not only that, but it's simply harder to cheat on a practical assessment given that you're actually carrying out the task. We don't ignore the fact that memory-based tests are important. They're useful in technical or scientific subjects, they're easier to mark and much more viable to administer. But when we favor practical learning and assessment, evidence suggests that the theory is learned more effectively, meaning that more forms of intelligences are considered while arguably making no sacrifices in the process.
A study led by Nina Katajouri aimed to evaluate the significance of early practical training as part of the curriculum and to find out to what extent the students felt that the hands-on approach fostered their learning. A total of 47 pharmacy students were interviewed during a 3-month practice period. Content analysis of the interviews showed that the practical training increased students' understanding of theoretical knowledge and their motivation to study. The results also showed that the students were able to rehearse their reflective skills during the theoretical studies as well. Logic dictates that we readjust our priorities, and a great first step is looking at how we value SVAs.
Finally, it can't go without saying that a great test should also serve as a learning experience. Emphasizing the importance of learning in the testing process shifts the perspective from a fear of failure to a pursuit of knowledge and growth, which further promotes academic integrity, especially when we can agree that we would be nowhere without being given the chance to learn from our mistakes. In the case of CXC, we take the test and are given a vague number from a mostly unique grading system with confidential grade boundaries, and our peers are nowhere to be found. At the end of the day, do we really learn anything? We study and go through the entire process, and they don't tell us anything specific about our performance, which begs the question, how are we meant to reflect? How are we meant to improve? If learning isn't at the forefront of our efforts, then what actually is? If the assessments are flawed and the feedback is vague, what is truly the purpose of these assessments and examinations?
In closing, it is evident that a paradigm shift in the realm of education, particularly in how we assess students, is due. Embracing practical assessments, promoting academic integrity, and providing meaningful feedback will lead to a more well-rounded and proficient workforce, better prepared to live in a world that forces us to be adaptable. By recognizing and nurturing diverse forms of intelligence, we can create a more inclusive and effective system that results in a more holistic view of education.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sinovia and Sydney. Education is key for universal achievement and creativity among youth. Don't you agree? I almost want to ask if any of us ever cheated while we were in secondary school, but I won't ask that question. I would ask you to raise your hand, but I won't ask at all. We're down to our final presentation, the threat of the existence of all schools in terms of AI in education, and this will be done by Atiba and Ronaldino, who will be presenting from online.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good, you're awake. As we've just discussed, looking at a holistic view of education, it's time to acknowledge the use of technology, the integration of technology. This is nothing new. We've been using the technology for many years. We even have online tests nowadays. So, what technology can we use that will revolutionize education? AI technology. Artificial intelligence. And that is why my colleague, Ronaldino, and I decided to present on the threats of AI and the existence of AI in schools. I'll move on by asking you one simple question. Should we fear AI or should we embrace it? By a show of hands, how many of you believe we should fear AI? Ignore it. Don't incorporate it in our schools. How many? Exactly. So how many of you believe that we should incorporate it, study it, learn it, and manipulate it to be better in our education system. Let me tell you, we are on your side. We believe you should embrace it. And I will now show evidence of this fact. I begin with moving on to a case study conducted by Princeton University. In this case study, the challenge was that Minerva High School in Philadelphia was experiencing a high dropout rate. Nearly half of their school students were dropping out before they could reach the full 4-year graduation. To combat this, what did they use? AI. The school used AI technology to look at data like their race, their gender, any other predictors that would say why they're dropping out, such as if they're balancing their schedule correctly, if they're working a job as well as coming to school. This, along with other information such as the nutrition factors, they employed things such as reducing the sugary drinks and sugary snacks in schools, things that we are doing now also. They also encouraged students to change their courses or gave them the option to change their courses if they weren't managing their time well. This, along with other measures, helped the school to be able to raise their graduation rate from 55% to 85%. Now, let's just say that's pretty good, right? Right? Okay. But something I did not tell you was that all of this data, the things that they connected about their home life, everything they found, all of this data was collected without the consent of the parents or the students. So this brings the question, how much data, how much information should teachers have access to? And how can they justify the collection of this data? Well, I think I can speak for most of my colleagues that I say I don't want teachers looking at my data, I don't want them knowing my private information, right? But let's look at it from the teacher's perspective. We discussed earlier that the role of education is to prepare us not for the workforce, but for life. When these students were not graduating, a teacher could say that they were not fulfilling that role. They were not preparing them for life. So therefore, they could say that they needed to do this, no matter how unethical or immoral it is, to somehow combat and correct this information, or correct this failure, which they did. Moving on to the more informative part of this segment. We will discuss a plethora of different things. We'll discuss what is AI. We'll take a dive into the future of AI. We'll look at the benefits and the threats of AI and solutions to these threats. Now, let's get right into it. My colleague, Ronaldino, will explain what is AI. Ronaldino?
So much, Skiba. Okay, so most people hear of AI and they think robots, but AI, also known as artificial intelligence, is one of those technologies that defy a single universally agreed upon definition, but a simple, comprehensive one offered by the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, is this. AI is the ability of machines and systems to acquire and apply knowledge and to carry out intelligent behavior. In very simple terms, machines and software acting human, imitating human intelligence, and making decisions from data without human intervention. What are some of the things it does? Well, it reads through and solves problems, adapts and improves based on information and instructions. Now, hearing this, I mean, it's easy to think, well, I don't interact with this kind of stuff in my day-to-day life, right? In my ordinary experience, I'm not encountering this very rarefied sounding type of technology. But that's really not the case. If I were to ask, how many people use YouTube, how many people use Google, how many people get recommendations, how many people see ads coming up in their Google feed, how many people use e-commerce websites like Amazon and so on, a good chunk of you would raise your hand, right? And that makes use of artificial intelligence technologies. I can give you some more examples. Here are 4 I have on the screen of artificial intelligence examples that many of you have likely heard of or interacted with in your everyday life. So the first is Sophia, this artificial intelligence, physical humanoid social robot. Sophia is able to mimic human social behavior and even induce feelings of love in many humans. If you've seen videos of her online, you know what I'm talking about. The second one is Siri. This is a virtual assistant, the VA of Apple devices. Siri functions similarly to personal assistant in real life, planning events, giving you reminders, answering questions, all in the palm of your hand. Very convenient for you. The third is Tesla's self-driving vehicles. Now, this vehicle essentially aims to relieve the task of driving, create opportunities for those who can't drive, and all driven by AI technology. And finally, machine translation in the form of Google Translate. This technology breaks down language barriers and allows people from some other language to speak in some native language or vice versa by the use of a smartphone. All of these are examples of AI technologies we experience, we interact with, and they aim to assist society in some way, shape, or form. So AI is very present with us. It's not going anywhere. And it's for us to look into its benefits, to recognize its benefits, also be aware of its threats. But that takes us to the future of AI. So I throw it back to Atiba to get into what are the goals, pursuits, and the purposes of some of these AI-driven technologies.
Papers, reading essays, and having to give marks. Like my colleague said earlier, we all know it too well. A teacher struggling to finish the CXC syllabus, then to have to take time out of their class to do something else, to mark something. AI can take away that task and give the teacher more time to teach. This is showing how AI can help teachers. How can it help students? One of the benefits of AI stood out to me the most, and it was the chatbot. How do you think we can use the chatbot to help our students? Well, it turns out CNN conducted a study that found that AI technology shows potential through structured therapy to help people with mental health issues. These chatbots offer structured therapy, in which they are given answers and solutions to problems by teams of specialized therapists. And when asked questions from patients, they can say, okay, give them a workbook-like method of approaching, saying, okay, this is what to do, this is an exercise you can do to relieve this stress, relieve this nervous thing that you're having. Imagine what this AI could do, for children that are speak to guidance counselors. The same guidance counselors that we mentioned earlier that are crucial to developing in our school, in our academic life, our personal life, and mostly our mental health. This takes us to the end of the benefits. My colleague Rolandino will pick up and take to the other side the threats of AI.
So one of the interesting things about artificial intelligence is you say to a group of people, and you can be certain that some fraction of that group of people will be really, really scared and wary of AI technology and say something maybe even conspiratorial about it. But that's because artificial intelligence, generally speaking, is a new development, right? It's a modern sort of advancement of or technological capacity, and it's developed significantly and rapidly in recent years, right? So artificial intelligence, previously, decades ago, all robots did was perform calculations that helped us with computational stuff, right? Over time, robots became able to do reasoning, robots became able to do, with machine learning, do things like pattern recognition, with deep learning, do things like model neural networks of humans and form intuitions. And now with generative AI, and things like ChatGPT, that's been, the holy grail of AI recently, so revolutionary, do things like create art and write essays and make music, do poetry. So that poses a real threat to us if it's not handled properly, right? So at the discussion table at the UA headquarters in Jamaica, some professors discussed and agreed that artificial intelligence platforms like ChatGPT have powerful capabilities, allowing it to write sophisticated human-like essays, even pass bar exams, complete assignments, and generate creative works. And that's prompted sort of a ban in schools all across the world of ChatGPT. But they came to the conclusion that the technology is only going to evolve, it's going to stay with us, and it's going to get better and may even become necessary in the future, that students know about it for the future digital age, and that schools refrain from banning it, but embrace in a way that best makes use of its benefits. But the issue of privacy, like any other form of any other piece of technology that handles data, the problem of privacy becomes a really significant one, both due to the volatile nature of the technology and its susceptibility to things like hacking and technical malfunction, which could result in data leaks or losses. As seen in the case study earlier, the problem of teachers' access to information will always come into play. But then this raises questions of how much access should teachers have, platforms have to students' information. What implications are there for our legal code that we craft around these very modern technologies? Those are issues that artificial intelligence raises for us. There's also the problem of the replacement of teachers with AI. The question that comes with the potential replacement of teachers include, does this mean losing the moral imperative that was discussed earlier? How would this affect pastoral care? As we presented to you, students spend 86% of their time at schools doing so some sort of moral teaching would fall upon teachers. Would AI be able to teach students in the same way? Would students even listen to AI? Would students lose the human connection that comes from having a physical teacher present in a classroom? Would AI be able to bring pastoral care? This is a real problem and a real threat because as AI rapidly advances in the era of automation, AI is replacing jobs that are easily replaceable. But how really replaceable is the job of a teacher? Those are questions we'll have to consider when we, move forward utilizing artificial intelligence technologies. And then there's the problem of plagiarism. So ChatGPT has brought this problem to the fore because, like we said, the generative element of ChatGPT literally allows students to complete assignments. So how does this affect the role of education and the responsibility of students in the education system? With all these threats to artificial intelligence, we should think about some solutions, some best practices that equip us as stakeholders in education to most maximize the benefits of artificial intelligence while minimizing its costs and threats. So I'll present some and pass it on to my colleague to present others. Student and teacher training. Student and teacher training important because one of the problems and disadvantages now of embracing artificial intelligence quickly is just that students and teachers aren't familiar with the technology. So training would better familiarize them to the technology so teachers can understand it, so they can prevent their students from abusing it, and that students can make most efficient use of the technology on their hands. But these training sessions should also teach students to be critical of the technology, because we know that there are problems of biases and inaccuracies in the information that exists on artificial on chatbots like ChatGPT. These artificial intelligence technologies reflect the human developers who developed them, who are also biased and flawed. And so there has to be some sort of critical assessment in the same way we do any other piece of literature or reading or research. Of course, artificial intelligence equips us to do research much more efficiently now, much more quickly, much more optimally. I like to think of ChatGPT as like some super advanced Google, but the same tests for the credibility and validity of data will still have to apply. Atiba?
Institutionalized data protection measures. Using applications like Safe Exam Browser, which we have been seeing being used successfully for our CXC Paper 1s. These can be used for all assessments to prevent students from accessing third-party devices and third-party websites and prevent them from plagiarizing. Also, installing protective software to ensure the privacy of our information, which can be seen in I've seen it in our school laptops that we use for testing, and just to do that, we'll also protect the data that we have. And yes, I have plagiarism detectors. Yes, that is AI. That means AI can detect AI. Employ AI gradually. We don't want to create inequality. Like what we saw with the COVID-19 pandemic, where some students did not have access to the internet or to laptops or devices where they could not come to class, which is something that's very basic and they need. So we want to employ it in smaller versions, smaller things, like the automated grading, which can make the teaching easier and not really affect the students as much. On to academic integrity. Ronaldinho?
So plagiarism is a big problem with ChatGPT and other modern iterations of artificial intelligence technologies. But this is very consistent with some of the teaching morality in school stuff that we were looking at earlier. We're going to have to be able to improve the classroom culture and cultivate attitudes of integrity in our students that sort of see them giving a critical care towards ensuring integrity in the completion of their assignments and so on. But also on the part of the institution, something very tangible is that institutions will need to establish codes of conduct and online policy standards that are consistent with the modern age, and that should also be tied to enforcement mechanisms, right? Punishments that ensure that these codes of conduct are strictly followed. So those are just some solutions. Certainly the discussion needs to keep happening. The discussion needs to be very present about the existence of AI and the threats it poses, but also the benefits that we can make use of and most efficiently maximize. So to conclude, we'll leave you with a quote and the very same question my colleague Atiba asked earlier. The quote is, "Our intelligence is what makes us human, and AI is an extension of that quality. Artificial intelligence is extending what we can do with our abilities. In this way, it's letting us become more human." Jan LeCun. The question I leave you with has not changed, but maybe your opinion has. And that is, should we fear AI or should we embrace it? It's up to you to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Atiba. Thank you, Ronaldinho. At this point in time, I would like to open the floor to any questions that you may have for the youth panelists that is here today. Oh, yes, please. Okay, I think one is coming. Yes, one is coming.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, first of all, I really want to applaud the panelists. I think I would say job well done. I think they deserve a round of applause. Looking at the issue of moral imperative, and I hear the cry of the moral values being or should be taken up by the school system, all right, because of the fact that some of the homes are dysfunctional and stuff like that. But of course, as we would say in Grenada, one hand cannot clap, all right? So I think that there must be collaboration and so on in terms of the school system and parents coming together to teach moral values or to instill moral values within in children. Now, in terms of acquiring values on the part of children, it's very complex because when a child goes within the school system, he or she is bombarded with, numerous different value systems from many or several different individuals. So from teachers, from children themselves, other students, and so on. So they are bombarded with several different value systems, and it therefore leads me to wonder, therefore whether a parent would really want his or her child to be dependent on the school system to teach his child, solely, the morality and so on. All right. Now, additionally, the psychologists, they believe that within the age of between 2 and 7, a child would learn most. All right. So it means, therefore, that a lot, is placed on the part of parents here to teach moral values. And so I think the home has a very important role to play in this particular regard, to instill values within the child at that particular age. And if a child get that real solid foundation, in terms of values and so on, they, even when they go to school, they, and they've been bombarded with different value systems and so on, they would remain sort of stable. All right. So a lot has to do with parents, especially in those formative years, to ensure that values are instilled in children. But as I mentioned, I think there must be some sort of collaborative effort. All right. So the school system must bring parents on board. All right, to and come together to ensure that children get that proper teaching in terms of values and so on.
Yeah. Good afternoon again, Ian Holder, Barbados. Sticking with the morality issue, I just wonder if it is that, I'm sure you guys, by the brilliance that you would have shown this evening, I know that you all guys know that there's a socialization process of life. School, church, media, all come together to socialize young people with values. So I was wondering if you were saying that the school needs to play a greater part in that process.
Well, addressing both of these statements. So I'm not going to deny that the family has the family and the religion, if you consider the religious values to also be moral values, then I would say that those do have the most significant part to play when it comes to establishing moral education. However, what I'm saying is that all the institutions should be trying to achieve the overarching goal of this is where we want our society to be in the future. So the school right now, regarding your question, the school right now, they do have things like the hidden curriculum, which is something that my teachers would have told me about. So things like saying prayers in assembly, for example, the Bible reading. So there's always that aspect of moral education within schools. What I'm saying though is that if it were not, because I'm not going to say that it isn't currently at the point that it needs to be, but what I will say is that if it were not at the point that it needs to be, if it wasn't the case that there was enough moral education to achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve, then you would ideally be able to put in more. Because at the end of the day, we still have to try and instill the morals into the children. If the family doesn't have enough time, for example, I would have mentioned that there's a large percent of time that the children are in schools. So if the family doesn't have time to properly instill the morals, then where the children are, which would be at school, they should then be able to supplement it. So it's not necessarily taking the whole moral imperative onto the school and only the school. It is just making sure that the goal is met through supplementation in school.
Yes, and a second question for you in the area of mental health. I think you would have focused a lot on the influence of social media with respect to mental health. But do you see the actual school environment, school climate, affecting the mental health of some students?
Okay. So in my opinion, or at least I can speak on my own experience, and I would say that it varies. So it's not really as linear as it may seem. When it comes to school, you kind of make your own journey, and obviously that journey is very heavily impacted by your peers and your teachers, right? So I feel like when it comes to mental health, the school environment specifically, I have not been strongly impacted by the school environment. However, the teaching curriculum has definitely had a strong impact on my mental health. And if I even begin to delve into the whole COVID-19 pandemic, the switch from teaching, in-person teaching to online teaching, it's a whole thing. So yeah, but definitely that hard shift, right, that you had from in-person to online. I do think though that we did a very good job kind of transitioning from online back into in-person. I think that was very well executed. However, when we shifted from pre-pandemic to current pandemic, that it was definitely affected.
Hi, I also spoke a bit on mental health. Regarding your question on whether school environments can, in a way, foster or contribute to this, I would sort of disagree and say that I feel like my experience in school has also contributed to mental health, specifically through social media. I don't know if it's like maybe a girl thing, but there's certain people that we tend to idolize on Instagram because they're always outside, they're always posting stories, they're always you know, looking pretty on, like, yeah, they're always like looking pretty in their posts and whatnot. And as a small child, and I talked a bit about cognitive development and how that correlates to the transitions that we go through in our educational lives. And so as small children, also coming to sort of idolize those people that seem to be perfect on the internet, I definitely think that that could severely impact mental health in that way.
Just to add on to what my other colleagues would have said, I actually want to take this approach. In terms of mental health and the environment, one of the major things that we see, especially within youth today, I know Kival spoke about the peer support in terms of your friends, right? But is also how the student looks at the teacher. Somewhere between 2020 to 2023, we've understood that it has become even harder for youth and harder for teachers. I mean, we understand the whole idea of the Great Barrier Reef, where teachers right now are even stretched to the capacity, and it limits them from being that caring teacher. I can speak from me at school. I have a big role model in my life and mentor, Mr. Dexter Allen. And I would say that Sir has taught me everything I needed to know about youth participation, especially as a youth activist. So does your environment at school change that mental health aspect? Of course it does, based both on the student level and the teacher level. And it is for us as I think it was Giovanni that said, when the teacher can put herself or himself out of the way to not only teach but become that educator, to sit down and have time with the student, it really makes an impact, significant impact on the youth's social development within schools.
Okay, good afternoon. Students, I cannot leave Barbados without saying how extremely proud I am of you and your contribution this afternoon. You were all very clear, very articulate, and clearly based on your responses, you're able to think on your feet. Excellent, excellent job, as well as to the coordinating teacher who worked so hard to make sure that you all were prepared. Well done, well done. I have a question though. You said that students spend 86% or thereabout of their time with the school. So let's say I accept that the school has to play a more significant role in helping to form students, in essence, what you were saying. I want to ask you, how do you think you could help to influence your peers and parents to recognize the role of the school in helping to shape children? All right, let me take that again. How do you think you can influence your peers and parents to recognize the role that you're saying the school has in helping to shape students? Because oftentimes, as administrators, I'm sure we can all agree, sometimes we come up to some resistance from the students and their parents. So tell us what we could do or what you could do to help them to understand our role. Thank you very much.
Okay, firstly, thank you for the compliment. And they want me to say, big up to Appleway. He really did guide us a lot in preparing for this conference. So thank you, sir. Now, regarding the question, now I would have mentioned a bit about the caring teacher, that person who is there and they would, of course, engage us in informal conversation. And you would wonder now, why is it that I brought that up? And why is it that I didn't necessarily speak too much on it? What made it so important that I would put it in the presentation and yet still not have a bunch of slides talking about it? Well, here's the reason that the caring teacher is so important. It humanizes the educational system. because you are the teachers are the bridge between, I guess, the policymakers and then the students and the policymakers and the teachers. So it's when you can then have a caring teacher, somebody who the child identifies as someone who they can follow. For example, my colleague Jaheen would have said that he has his mentor who is a teacher. It's much easier to influence them that way, to get them to understand that these are some things that you have to, or rather that we have to achieve as a society. So if you could have, let's say, if a lot of the teachers were able to then be this caring teacher, as I would have said in this slide, it would be much easier for them to explain to the children, and that the children would actually want to absorb the explanation that we have to work together as a society, and that although they're a teacher and although you're working for the Ministry of Education, the whole idea is that we have to, together as a society, not just the government, but representative of everybody, have to build each other up. So it comes down more so to an interpersonal relationship rather than a strategic plan that you could execute. So it's really difficult, I would admit. It's a difficult concept to wrap your head around, especially for me to come up with a plan like this. That's why I had to then leave it to y'all and say, okay, so what should we do? What should we do? Because realistically, there's just so many factors that you have to take into consideration when you're taking someone's personal opinion or someone's personal influence and using it in the space of, I guess, the government. But right now, as it stands, with the knowledge that I have and the research that I would have done, I would say that having that interpersonal relationship, that caring teacher aspect of school, where the teacher can then easily explain to the student, who then realizes that that teacher actually cares about them and is not just an agent for the Ministry of Education, I would say that that would be an effective tool that you could use to, I guess, sensitize people to the idea of shared responsibility when it comes to developing morality.
Good afternoon. I have a simple question, but before I do that, I too wish to congratulate all of the youths on your presentation, your poise. I want to take it one step further, though, to suggest that it's not just preparation for today, it is indeed pointing to the fact that the Bajan and the West Indian education system, despite the cracks we have to plaster over, is indeed working, and you all are testament to that. My question to you is a simple one. I'm really looking forward to hear, I would like to hear a male and a female perspective. We're talking about artificial intelligence and all that it brings. But my question to you is direct. Do you think that the human intelligence, you have a congregation of principals from all over the Caribbean, do you think we listen to you?
Yes, no, I just good. Do I think that teachers listen? Wait, who? Do I think that principals listen? I mean, I think that it truly depends. It varies depending on which school you go to, where you're from. There are schools that have, a large student population, and being able to hear the issues and the opinions of every single student per se, it is going to be difficult. I'm sure each of you here can attest to that. There's going to be some people that disagree with policies in schools. There's going to be some people that disagree with practices that we implement in schools. However, I think that it, to me, is clear that there is some initiative that is being taken by principals, by teachers, by school communities in general. And this very conference in of itself is sort of an example of that, and a further example of how you can I'm sorry, the question the man had asked previously about how you can like foster that change. By us sitting here, researching on these presentations, going in depth in building our knowledge of these issues that affect us regionally, it shows that, I don't know, I guess the kids will be all right, you know? Like, we have that initiative, we know that something needs to change, and us as students and people, other people in the school community, such as principals, are going to make that change. So by sitting here today, by asking the question, by me answering, it shows that there is something going on. There's a discussion that's going on. Sure.
I just want to add to that quickly. Also, I feel like that question, the answer will vary depending on who you ask. And also, like, even within specific peer groups. So personally, yes, I do think that you guys are listening, and I do think that principals are making an effort. And as she just said, like, this conference in and of itself, I think is a testament to that. But however, since, as Giovanni said earlier, you can't get the whole population to have the same idea. So if I'm presenting an idea and let's say my idea is A, and he's presenting an idea, the idea is B, and and Storm is also presenting an idea, her idea is A, and obviously majority wins, A is the answer, and principals listen and they implement A. When you ask me if I think that principals are listening, if you think that principals are hearing, then I will say yes. However, if you ask Giovanni, he's going to say no, because his idea was not implemented, his voice was not heard, you know? So I think that it really depends on who you ask.
Sorry, one last thing I want to say. In case that question was coming out of somebody saying, like a child saying, that they do believe that the principals do not listen, my thing is that it is possible that that the child does not see. Because if I were to tell you something that did not align, like out of ignorance, I told you something that was not legal or just didn't make sense, and then you do not do it, and you don't take any of you don't implement any of the suggestions that I give, because truthfully all of them you will run into a bunch of red tape, and I don't appreciate that. It may look to me like if I'm just speaking and nobody is listening, nobody really cares. Well, that's not the reality. The reality is just I don't understand everything myself. So if a child were to say that the principal wasn't listening, I would immediately assume that it's a case where the child is not seeing that there was an error, or it was not as simple as they think it was to implement whatever that child was saying. Because that is something that I've seen with a lot of my colleagues, where they would say, oh, well, I spoke to this teacher or I spoke to the principal and nothing really came about it. Then you find out that that child is trying to tell the teacher to go on the political platform and lambaste the government, which my teacher told me recently, you can't do that. I didn't know that. He was just saying that today. So yeah, if I were to say that, I could imagine that you wouldn't really continue with that plan.
Good afternoon, and I want to join with my other colleagues in saying that you did an excellent job. Okay? And to you here present, face to face, and our other students online, I am a very hopeful person, but this afternoon you gave me renewed hope. And I am saying to myself, not future, but I'm saying these students are Caribbean leaders. You know? So, and I want to encourage you to continue to develop your skills, because I could really see you playing leadership. You are leaders now, but to be in leadership positions, different leadership positions in years to come. So thank you very much. I just want to touch on AI. Let's take, for example, you were given, every time you are given an essay to write, one of your peers usually just sit back while you are there jotting down your points and writing and typing, and the student will say to you, why waste your time? There is AI. When I go home, I just go through. I can't remember right. I just go there and I plug that in and I get my essay. Why waste your time? And every time the student says that. I would like to know what would your reaction be? How would you guide or advise the students? Just share with me, what would you say to that student?
So I guess the answer to this question would vary from person to person because it depends on how you look at it. Because me being a logical person, me being someone who values the skills and the information that I learned from school and sees myself growing from a person that actually wants to use these skills in life, will understand that if I rely and over-rely on this technology and let it do all my work for me, what am I really learning? I'm not learning anything. It's not sinking in. I'm putting all my information into something and letting it do the work for me. So I tell that person that you may be getting the results, but this is only for the short run. You need to think about the long run. You need to say, how is this going to affect me? It's going to have a negative effect. You're not going to learn anything. You're not going to be applied the skills because you didn't apply them now. You can't apply them later. But obviously, there will be other people who say, you know what, I just want the marks and go and use ChatGPT. But I believe that we should really, like I said in the solutions to the threats, even having workshops where we explain these exact same threats of over-reliance and becoming less prepared for the world of work and the world of life because of over-reliance on this technology. We could have workshops where we explain to these students, or just the students in general, saying, don't use it because of X, Y, Z. Yeah.
Good answer. I semi-agree. And also a good question, because this isn't a thing that's actually happened to me. I think it was an application that me and a friend were doing, and I was kind of struggling with it. And she had gotten it done in like a night or two and said, oh, I just like used ChatGPT. And this was when it was like first sort of like becoming like a thing in the media, like people were first starting to hear about it. And to me, that was like the most absurd thing ever. Because in my personal opinion, and I don't know, I'm definitely one of the people that speaks out about AI in a way. But to me, it seems almost absurd because is it really easy, or do you not have the ability to actually write it yourself? And I think that if you continue to rely on it and to use it in that way, eventually you are going to get to a point where you could not write an application or an essay yourself. Mm-hmm. I once had a teacher in junior school tell a boy in my class who was cheating that you can cheat all you want, but when it comes to writing that examination, it's what is in your brain that's actually going to matter. It's not what's on your computer. It's not what's on the phone in the desk pocket. It's what's truly up here, because you can't really cheat in those exams. And so to me, I find that very oftentimes in our society, like Giovanni said, where we have a culture where getting ahead or like getting stuff done in a day, in a night is prioritized. You're seen as productive. And I think that in that society that we live in, AI sort of hinders that integrity and that personal integrity that we have.
Very quickly, because I know we're about to end, I just wanted to say that this also kind of correlates to something that Storm and Sydney were saying in their presentation, the teaching to test. I believe that, that as principals and as education officials, that you all have to evolve with the world, if that makes sense, you know? As these students are starting to be able to use ChatGPT, whatever, in most cases, we can't really ban it, especially if, when it comes down to like in-home assignments or stuff. So I believe that what we have to do is find a way to test so that it kind of does not, like, it doesn't give you an option to use AI. Personally, obviously that is going to vary. Yeah, that was very difficult. And it's going to vary from subject to subject. But I do think that is something that your principal should keep in mind. And yeah, oh, and practical assessments too, because obviously AI can't do practical assessments. It's not in the room with us. Yeah, that's all I want to say though.
I am so sorry. I have to apologize. I have to wrap this up. We went a little long, and we do have another function later this evening, students. But I'm going to ask someone to do the vote of thanks, and then I have a quick notice about the laptops. Not everyone has brought in their laptops to get the program put on. So, vote of thanks first.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I am so pleased that I was selected to do this task, because the richness that was shared with us, we are all going to continue to remember it. I would like each person here, each of these young people here, to stand and say your name to us. In the future, we are going to see these young people in all kinds of places and spaces. And we who are here, assembled this evening, must be able to remember you and say, aha, I heard him speak, or I heard her speak, and I knew that this was the future that they were going to have. So stand, each one of you, starting with our moderator, say your name. Yes, use the mic. We want to hear it because we have to remember you.
Hi guys, I am Jaheem Thomas.
Hello everyone, my name is Atiba Seeley Thompson.
Nice.
Hello, my name is Sydney Ford.
You have to say that again, Sydney. Listen, I don't take mumbles. I really don't take
Sydney
mumbles.
Ford.
There you go.
My name is Sinovea Storm Husbands, but you can just call me Storm.
Okay.
My name is Kewell Griffith.
Mm-hmm.
And my name is Giovanni Gittins.
And we have our two young people online. Are they still there? Ronaldo and Lisa, I believe it was.
Ronaldinho.
They are out.
Ronaldinho. Oh, yeah.
They are out now. Oh, Lisa is there. I know my girl Lisa was around. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Lisa Yee.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. And is Ronaldo there? Okay, so Ronaldo may be the only one we missed. So someone call Ronaldo's name. Ronaldo? Ronaldinho, sorry. McLean? Ronaldinho McLean. So I want you to remember those names, because these young people came together and they would have continued something that started with CAPS 2021. In CAPS 2021, there was an entire day that was given to the youth, what we called our youth strand. And why was it included? Because of this. Because we know that the young people have voices, they have things to say, they have ideas to share, and we are learning from them as they do so. And so we thank you, young people, for being here today, for letting us hear your thoughts, for the amount of work that you would have put in, because this didn't just come off just like that, okay? So the collaboration is clear. You all made your connections, you communicated, the research was done. Today you displayed your intelligence, but not just intelligence. You displayed your passion, you displayed the fact that you understand that as young people, you have a purpose. You have called on all of us here to be accountable, to be responsible, to be reflective. And we thank you for that. Heads, hearts, can I do it? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. And so I leave you just with one note of thank you again to the coach. The coach is Mr. Carl Applewhite. Could we see Mr. Carl Applewhite, please? Sir, we thank you, we thank you, we thank you for training these young people. From the sixth form at Harrison College, we thank you, sir. Each territory herein represented, Trinidad, Jamaica, and Barbados. This was a job that was well done. I leave you with this one quotation, just for you to think about. It says, the foundation of every state is the education of its youth. You have just told us that the Caribbean is in good hands. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, don't forget that Friday's session is interactive and you need to take your laptops to the back. Now, if you're comfortable with it, they can work on your laptops tomorrow while we are on tour. If you're not comfortable, you can bring it on Thursday, but it should be in by Friday so that you can take part in the interactive session. Also, for each session, there's a feedback form, and it's supposed to be done after the session. So if you haven't been sending in your feedback on the sessions, please do so. I believe it's on the app. It's one of the links on the app. So if you could do that. And then finally, the hotel needed to do a safety brief. So that's going to happen now. And then after that, you can go and get ready for this evening's entertainment for the Bajan night.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kadisha Mullin from the Events and Catering Department. I want to welcome you all to Accra Beach Hotel and Spa. In the event of an emergency, an alarm with a ringing song will be activated. The alarm will be silenced to give the security and maintenance team an opportunity to determine if there is a breach. If there is, the alarm will immediately be reactivated. Someone will meet you at the meeting room. You will move directly to the exits and stay together. The exits are here. In any event, use the stairwell and not the elevator. A member of staff will direct you to our emergency evacuation point, which is located to the east of the property at our Rockley car park opposite restaurant. That's just that way. At the assembly point, your on-site facilitator, which is Ms. Sharianne Waldron, will have a list of participants to do a roll call. We thank you for choosing Accra and take this opportunity to wish you a very successful event. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, this evening we're going to meet for 6:30 in the lobby, and we don't want to leave anyone this afternoon tonight. It's a fantastic program. It's planned for Bajan night, so 6:30 the lobby. The transportation leaves then, right? And the heads were supposed to meet. And the meeting for the heads that was supposed to happen at 4:30 obviously will have to happen another time. Yeah.